Welcome to Talk+Water, the podcast that takes a deep dive into the world of water with those making waves. This is Todd Votteler, your host. I'm also editor-in-chief of Texas+Water and the Texas Water Journal. And I have with me tonight at Satellite Grill, or Greek Bistro, I guess it is now, down here in Circle C, Jennifer Walker and Johnathan Seefeldt with the National Wildlife Federation. And let me tell you about them, and then I'll tell you what we're going to talk about. First of all, Jennifer is the director of the Texas Coast and Water Program. I noticed it says Texas Coast, not Texas Coastal. I wonder if that's no, it's Texas Coast, right?
Yeah, because we have had a coast program, like a Gulf Coast program for a long time.
Yeah.
And then we've had our Texas Water program. The Gulf Coast program has been the whole Gulf Coast, and we actually kind of lopped off, and we're like, we want to combine our Texas Water program with Coast because clearly they're connected.
Yeah.
And
Okay, good deal. So Jennifer has 20 years of experience with statewide water policy, and in particular, which I found interesting, is that she's chair of Austin's Water Forward Task Force, which is working to implement a 100-year water plan focused on deploying one water solutions to meet future water needs. I need to have you back to talk about that. Maybe get you and Robert Mace or something.
Can do. He's my vice chair.
Excellent. And Jennifer is also appointed by the Texas Water Development Board to be the environmental interest representative on the Texas Water Conservation Advisory Council. So if you're listening to this podcast, you should be reading Texas+Water. If you read it, when it comes out here in a week or two, there's an interview with Karen Goose, who's the chair of the Texas Water Conservation Advisory Council. So there's a shameless plug for Texas+Water. And Jennifer has a BS in Ecology, Evolution, and Conservation Biology from University of Texas. Johnathan Seefeldt is the Senior Communications Manager for the National Wildlife Federation's Texas Coast and Water Program. Johnathan's got a decade of experience in water research and environmental communications and has published, I thought this was very interesting, The History of Large-Scale Water Infrastructure in Semi-Arid Environments, with a particular focus on long-term impact on climate infrastructure projects. I want to see that. Sounds pretty damn cool. And Jonathan's doctorate is in environmental history from the University of Texas at Austin. I'm going to ask you about that here in a minute.
Sure.
And so Jennifer and Johnathan, welcome and thank you for being part of Talk+Water.
Glad to be here.
Glad to be here. And this is a repeat for you, Jennifer. You and Ken Kramer were on, probably 2 years ago, I guess?
It's been a while, yeah.
We were wearing masks.
We were wearing masks, that's right. We were very nervous because we were inside and we all lived to tell the tale.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Oh, boy. We somehow got through that one. So starting I know we've asked you this, or I've asked you this in the past, but, with your background in water, I'm curious, when did you kind of first know you're going to devote your career to water? Can you kind of tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I was always really interested in water and river systems. And in fact, I really thought I was going to end up doing field work on rivers and doing riparian habitat restoration and wetland delineations and just, being out in the river and getting to know every nook and cranny. And that's really what I trained to do and what I thought I was going to do. And then I ended up after college working at Sierra Club and they had this wonderful water program that was starting up. And I just inserted myself into that and wanted to be part of it. And it's been no looking back ever since, because I still get to do work for rivers, for our ecosystem. It's just from a different perspective. It's from the policy perspective, which I didn't really appreciate and know so much about when I was out, tromping around rivers and doing transects and stuff when I was in school.
But, I had kind of a similar experience as an intern after college working for the Fish and Wildlife Service up in Fort Worth. And, I kind of saw what that office kind of experience having to do with the listing or delisting maybe of the Concho Water Center. You remember that?
Yeah.
And I saw that and I thought, I love water, but maybe, working the policy side, might help me to kind of avoid, being in a situation where somebody else makes the decision and I don't really get to say too much about it or can't do much about it. So.
Well, I think the policy part's really important. And in fact, I remember when I was in school, I even asked about, should I be taking some policy classes? And they're like, no, you don't need that. But I really do think that everyone that's doing environmental science and ecology and, and work on behalf of the environment,
right,
whether it's, field work or whatever, we should all know the policy because it's all really connected. Like your work as a scientist can support and feed the policy, and the policy that's made impacts the work that you get to do as a scientist. So it's a definite feedback loop, very related.
I'm 100% with you on that. So, Jonathan, I got the same question for you. Tell us how you kind of, decided at some point, I'm going to be thinking about water for a long time.
Well, I think for me, it was a longer, more circuitous route. So I grew up abroad. I actually grew up in the Himalayas in India, North India.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Everybody's got a really interesting story except me. That's I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No.
Like a third or fourth person I've interviewed now who grew up, they were like in the jungle or they were like doing something like that. Keep going. Sorry.
No. I mean, lots of times I wish I was born in Texas sometime.
We won't tell anybody. Nobody listens to this podcast. So
yeah. So growing up in the mountains there was actually a major dam being built there. It was one of the highest in the world, funded by the Soviets. And every day I saw big trucks carrying, materials to and from the construction site. They had to build a whole new road up the mountain gorge where we lived. So it made me, I was just curious about the project. So I did like a science fair project where I built a little model of the dam and tried to understand the effects on the ecology in the area. Anyway, it was clear I was kind of interested in water from that. But I didn't really pursue it at all. I mean, I went to graduate school in history planning to study basically social movements, social change. But some of my field work, I kept finding myself drawn to these new water infrastructure projects when I was doing my field work. And I realized just after a while, I was spending a lot of time just obsessing over maps of lakes and reservoirs and trying to track watersheds. And I realized I was just really into this aspect of the research. And so I tried to tilt my research towards water, really. And then ever since then, it's kind of been a whole new world opening up to me. And I find myself in the world of Texas water now.
Great. Well, history is a big deal in water, and people kind of ignore it.
Yep.
I've got some interesting history I'm going to roll out here with a study I'm doing for Texas 2036. But that's a clue. I just dropped a clue. I'm not going to say anything else about it.
A little Easter egg.
A little Easter egg, yeah. But I've got, a complete set of all the water plans going back to the 61 plan. And, they're just great. They're great history documents.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some crazy stuff in there. Like, we may need, one of them in the 60s was kind of, we may need to develop groundwater in the future because radioactive fallout might contaminate all the surface water. I was like, somebody we know pointed that out to me. I was like, I've never seen that before. I had no idea that was in there. But I digress big time.
You should do a podcast on that. That's
I should.
That's
crazy things from the state water plan. I've heard there's some good ones.
Right. It doesn't even really, this 68 plan, it's got all these projects which add up to 2 million acre feet or 3 million acre feet, stuff like that. And then says, oh, by the way, this line coming in from the east. Yeah, that's where the 12 million acre feet come in that pipeline. Like, okay, that's kind of an untold story there, the whole water plan. So we are not just kind of casually getting together. We are here really tonight to talk about your new report that just come out from the National Wildlife Federation and Texas Living Waters Project called Hidden Reservoirs Addressing Water Loss in Texas, which is very timely. We're still in a drought here. And so tell us, kind of not the basic findings, but what you set out to do in this report and who you were working with. Let's start with that part of it first.
Okay. So this report, we've been working on it for a long time because we really had to, develop some methodology and really figure out how to answer this question. But the idea was we've been as a project working on water conservation in Texas for a long time, and we really wanted to dial in on one of the more important things that we could do to secure water. And the two things that we have really settled in on, and we've done lots of work on outdoor watering and how to implement outdoor watering restrictions.
All right.
Hi.
Apologies about that wait.
No problem. No problem. It looks like y'all are busy, so that's good.
Our slightly busy this evening. Welcome to Satellite.
you.
My name is Stefan. I'll be your server this evening.
Thanks, Stefan.
You're very, very welcome. Can I start you off with something to drink besides water? A glass of wine, whiskey?
I think the answer is yes to that. You want to?
Yeah, I would like to have this. I'll take the Skinny Rita.
It's going to be it. Absolutely. Would you like salt with that?
Sure.
Absolutely.
So the Satellite Delight, it's got grapefruit juice and it's kind of sweet, kind of tangy kind of thing. Or what's it? I'll try that.
Ooh, that sounds good too.
Who's it?
I think I'll just take a Shiner.
Shiner?
Yeah. This is a down-to-earth guy. I'll tell you right there.
I found a Shiner in the back of my refrigerator today, and I was like, where did this come from? I haven't had one of these in my fridge in a long time.
Just been there waiting for it.
It must have been left over from the kids or something, the teens.
While we wait for the drinks, would you also like to place your appetizers as well, or
Are y'all getting anything to eat? I mean, you can if you want.
I'm not at this moment. I might get something.
That's
but-
all right. Take your time.
Yeah.
I'll be back with the drinks.
Thank you.
You're very
Thank
welcome.
you. All right. So we got our drink order in. That's like always one of the key things.
Yep.
And we got our water. I'm going to take a little sip here while you tell us about your report. Or start.
Yeah. So we really wanted to focus in on some of the most impactful strategies that we could, employ in Texas to try to increase our water supply, to lock in efficiency. We have done work in the past on really trying to quantify how much water could be saved from reducing outdoor landscape irrigation. We've been working on that for the last couple of years. And the other place we really wanted to focus was addressing water loss, leakage through our distribution infrastructure and our communities. So we have been working for probably a little over a year on this report, using data from the Water Development Board. Communities in Texas have to submit water loss audits, which has a lot of great information in them. And then we also have our regional water planning process, which we just had a water plan get approved just last year. So we had the 2022, it's called, it was approved last year though, state water plan, which lays out for each of the regions and all the water user groups the needs, the shortages that we can expect to see in each of our regions. There's strategies identified, of course, to meet those needs. But so we wanted to really look at how much water are we losing? How much can we save? What's economically able to save? How will that make up the shortages or the needs? How can we address the needs identified in our state water plan? And we didn't want to just like lay that out. I mean, while that has really been the bulk of the work and really important, we also wanted to look at the cost benefit and how much these strategies cost and compare them, to other strategies. So it really is, really across the board information on water loss and what we can do, what some of the strategies, and then also just trying to make the case that it's actually cost effective to do that. I mean, the state water plan has strategies to meet our water needs proposed. They all have a price tag attached to them, and water loss frequently comes in at a lower price tag.
Excellent. So, I was looking at this, and kind of my first question I wanted to talk to you about is, and you just made me think of something before I get to that. In the water planning process, is there ever a whole lot of focus on water loss? And maybe, is that not, I guess it's not a recommended strategy, but is there ever, okay, we know in region L, maybe, we're losing this much water.
Yeah.
And hey, if we address that would be.
So it can be a recommended strategy.
Okay.
So in our analysis, when we looked at all the water management strategies for all the water user groups, we saw that 7 of the regional water planning groups had water loss explicitly listed as a line item water management strategy with savings attached to it. And then an additional 4 regional water planning groups had a water conservation strategy, and then they would have like a menu of items listed underneath that. So they had a water conservation strategy with amounts of water that could be saved, and then water loss would be one of the options. So we counted that too, even though we would really like to see water loss explicitly called out as a discrete water management strategy, because it really requires special attention and investment in a way that water conservation doesn't. I mean, water conservation requires specific attention and investment as well, but they're kind of different, different types of strategies.
Right.
So about half the planning groups have water loss as an explicit strategy. Some more have it included in the menu of items, and then there's a handful of groups that don't include water loss at all that we could identify. And then we
and is that municipal?
We're looking at municipal water use.
And so, but I know your study is, but in the water planning process, that water loss is all municipal.
It's all municipal. Okay. Yeah. So we're looking at municipal water management strategies. Yes. There was something else I was going to tell you about that. So in the plan, in our report, we break down, we have all the regions laid out, and then we talk about, we have, we will absolutely get into this, but we have estimates for how much water can be saved with the, with different levels of effort. And
is that the red line?
This is the water loss.
Estimated water loss per
H
for each planning region. Yeah. So C and H really stick out there.
But this light blue line right here is actually the water loss, water management strategies included in the plan. So these are regions that actually have water loss in there. So while H has a lot of water loss, estimated water loss, they do have strategies in their plan to address water loss. But based on our analysis, there's more that they can do with different levels of effort.
So where is H? I can't even remember which one.
Region H is Houston.
Oh, it is. Okay.
Yeah.
Harris County.
And Region C, which is the other really big one, is Dallas-Fort Worth area.
Gotcha. What's it? L, that's San Antonio.
So, one of the basic findings is a lot of the water loss is obviously concentrated in cities.
Big cities. Yeah. Big cities. And so you've got, one of the takeaways from your report is Texas is losing an average of over 50 gallons of water per connection every day. So your water utility, H connection is, that's a house, right? So for each household, 50 gallons of water loss per day on average.
Yeah.
That's a lot. I was
It's a lot of
like,
water.
Yeah.
kind of shocked. I thought it might be like 10 or 20.
Yeah. Drink your.
I know what each one of those is. That's a nice looking drink. Yeah.
For you, sir.
Thank you.
Very well.
Thank you.
Very well.
Appreciate it.
Of course.
So it is a lot of water, and we were surprised to see those numbers. And in the report, we really we break up the water loss too by size categories. So the average is the average across the state, 51 gallons per connection per day. But we also wanted cities to be able to look at this report and be able to look at cities of a similar size and kind of compare themselves, because I think that a smaller city might look at this and see all the cities aggregated and be like, well, I'm just a small city, so what does this mean for me?
Right.
So we really were mindful about breaking this out. So we have very large cities, so cities that are above 100,000 population, large, that's between 25 and 100,000, medium cities, 25,000 to 10, and then under 10,000 cities. So the average is a little different between them.
I think that's one of the interesting takeaways from the data is the average water loss in very large cities. So you'd expect, of course, the volume to be larger in large cities, but also the amount of loss per connection is higher in cities. So I think one of the maybe conventions or stereotypes in water loss, at least in Texas, is that there's higher water loss in rural areas per connection. And what the data is showing us is actually there's very high water loss rates in dense urban areas.
Well, look, so we've got, of course, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act that President Biden signed, the bipartisan, also known as Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, and it has a lot of water in it, money for water. I just had one sip.
Let's see where this goes.
And so I know that there's a lot of money in there for like removing lead pipes and things like that. But is any of that money available to address this issue?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. I think there's $2 billion available for Texas, designated for Texas water infrastructure, and it's got very wide applicable uses. So addressing water loss is definitely one of them. And that's available over the next 5 years, starting this year. So
a lot of that money is going to be available through the state revolving fund, through the Clean Water and Drinking Water State Revolving Fund, and communities can apply to those funds. The appropriate one that is infrastructure based, I believe it is the Drinking Water Fund. So there is an annual application process. Project information forms are due in March. Then there's a process the board does and a rating, and the Water Development Board, that they do, and projects are selected. And one of the great things about the IIJA is that they want 49% of the funds that are distributed to be forgivable loans or grants. And there's a real focus on getting these funds to low-income and disadvantaged communities and folks that aren't able to maintain and make investments in their water systems.
Right. Is there any data in the study that kind of looks at that kind of determines hey, some of these communities that have been underinvested in terms of their water infrastructure, are they having more problems with leaks than some other cities, other communities, or can you see any of those kind of differences?
that is a question we're still exploring. So we didn't get that granular with this data, partly because we wanted to reach some statewide conclusions. But we actually that's our next report, is looking into sort of historic underinvestment in infrastructure in Texas and where there are actually holes existing in the existing systems, and water loss will be a big part of that analysis.
So, kind of staying on the money issue here, you already brought this up, Jennifer, but, I guess the strategies of the water plan, most of the strategies have for new water, right? They're, I don't know, probably $700 or $800 to $1,500 per acre foot of new water that might be developed. And of course, an acre foot is about a third of 1 million gallons. And so this is a lot less expensive to fix these leaks. I mean, it's what, $200 or $300 an acre foot or something?
Yeah, it can be quite a bit less expensive. Of course, there's economies of scale. If you're a community that's losing a ton of water and you're investing in water loss strategies, you get more bang for the buck. One of the really great things that working with our consultant is he's worked with communities all over the world on assessing their water loss and strategies for investment. And he's taken a lot of that cost data and done a lot of really interesting data analysis to look at like the curve of investment and the dollars spent and the gallons saved. So I really encourage folks to go and take a close look at that. And Johnathan might be able to have some numbers to share with us here.
Good.
Yeah, just looking at it. So the two strategies that seemed to be the cheapest were large meter replacement. And that's, I mean, anecdotally, we've also heard that from a lot of utilities too. But also acoustic active leak detection. I mean, the cost range from our analysis is as low as $73 per acre foot to $239. So that's significantly
You
lower.
said large meter?
Large meter.
What's that? What's a large meter?
So there's sort of two broad categories of water meters. You have small ones, which are household level,
Okay.
and then large ones that are more connected to larger networks, tabulating water for larger distribution networks.
Gotcha.
Those are probably the most cost effective in terms of replacing them.
And there's really there's two components of water loss we're talking about here. We're talking about actual physical leakage from our water pipes.
Right.
But then there's also apparent loss, which is this mismeasuring and inaccuracy.
Okay.
So it's a portion. It's not the biggest portion. The biggest portion is the water that's lost through leaky infrastructure.
Right.
But it is important to note that we also have to measure it properly, so we have to know what we're dealing with. And a lot of meters aren't measuring properly. So that is it's what the research has found is really one of the first places you should look is to make sure that you're measuring well, and then to try to locate leaks and repair them.
And that's not lost water, physical water, that's lost revenue to utilities.
Exactly.
Right. So, so the average of 50 or 51 gallons per household per connection or whatever. So how much? I mean, of that do you think is kind of lost in transmission before it gets to the household and being lost when it gets to the house? I mean, is there a way to tease that out, or is that really kind of too granular?
I mean, that gets very granular.
And that's the first time I've ever used the word granular, by the way.
But the data
First time you've heard the word?
Used it. No, I've used
In one
it.
of your podcasts? Oh,
Oh,
that
ever.
you've used
No,
it.
ever.
Oh, well,
I've
welcome
never
to the
used.
club.
Yes. So
the water loss that we're talking about is water loss in utility pipes. So it's not household, like a leak in your basement or something.
It's before the meter at your house.
gotcha.
So thinking about that 51 gallons, think about it this way. Say we're in Austin, which we are.
Right.
We're pumping water out of Lake Travis. We're pumping it to our and also Lake Austin. We're pumping it to the water treatment plant, treating that water, cleaning it, putting it in the distribution lines to send to our homes. And on the way there, on average, we're losing 51 gallons of that water along the way.
So I'm glad.
And so some of it's mismeasured.
Right.
Most of it is leaked.
So I'm glad that you told me that, because I feel better hearing that, because I was thinking about, wow, they're going to have to fix something at every household connection someplace. When it's probably like leaks that, probably one big leak, or maybe there may be many small leaks, but it's probably easier to tackle that way as opposed to like every household connection, we got to figure out how to go in there and do something.
Well, I should also take a little moment to go on a tributary here to talk about like what happens in houses, because houses do have leaks, and many communities in Texas are deploying AMI, which is automatic meters systems, and so you have more frequent reading of your meters, and you can know on a really granular level. This will be the word of the podcast. On a really granular level, the water use. It's great. It's great if you want to, blame your specific family member for using all the water. You can be like long showers, outdoor irrigation. You can see the signature of the water use if it's really that detailed. But all joking aside, what utilities do with that, they take that data, and if they have good systems, the meter doesn't save water itself. They'll just do accurate billing. What the cities can do is have software that helps them read this data and communicate with customers, and customers have more information about their water use, and then that helps locate meters in houses and see unusual water use patterns. My dad was telling me just this weekend that one of his friends got one of the new meters in Austin, and the city called them and was like, "You're using 1,800 gallons of water a day," and he had always been forever complaining about how high his water bill was, but that was about it, And come to find out, now they have the meter, the city contacted him. He had this huge leak, and he repaired it. And so that's there we go. So
wake up, everybody.
So that's a real good example of how the automatic meters and the real-time information about your water use can be helpful, but that is not the kind of water loss that we're talking about in this report. We're talking about up until the house. So if you do that, if a utility really invests in this water loss here, and then also on the conservation side invests in good meters or communications with their customers, you can really you can pack on the savings.
So my meter story is, they were putting our new digital meter in. They were installing it.
You've got yours now.
Yeah, I was like, wow, I'm really excited about this. And I signed up for it. And
Did you sign up for ITX Water?
Yep.
Good job.
ITX Water. And I get messages when we water our lawn. I see how much we use. And I try to get in there and look at more of it. I can't get in. I'm like, I called them up and I said, "No, your wife's name's on the account. It's her email address." I said, "Well, can't you switch it?" "No, we can't switch it." "Well, can't you give me something?" "No, sorry, you got to talk to your wife." And so she's not, I don't know, whenever I need this information, she's someplace and they'll send her a code and, she doesn't see it or something. So I got kind of frustrated, but that's my one water meter story. Hopefully nobody else has got that same problem.
Maybe that can be an improvement. You're actually the second person I've heard in the water world that has gotten their new meter, but their spouse is on the water bill, but the spouse is not the one that's the water nerd.
Right. That's our problem. That is our problem for sure. So I was like, well, I'm her husband.
Future portal update.
Yeah, portal. I would like that. The other water story I have related to that is there's an old-fashioned way to detect leaks. Last week, I walked out in my garage, and the ceiling was bulging, and there was water dripping. And it's because the year before, I had low flush toilets installed, and one of them was not done correctly, and some got rusted, and ipso facto, I have a giant hole in my garage ceiling. So
your toilet's in the
it's above
attic?
it.
Upstairs?
Yeah. So
two-story.
Yeah. So that's my other water leak story. Water leak.
Good illustration. Things can
Sounds
go
like if you had access to that
I might have
app,
got a note.
you would have gotten an alert.
Right. I at least yell at my kids for showering.
I do know that when you fix leaks that and provide proof of that to City of Austin, they will give you some money back on your water bill.
Oh, really?
Yeah, hot tip.
Okay. I might have to go home. Wow.
They like it when people fix leaks. They like to,
So, Jonathan, the total estimate of water loss in which year is this? It's looking at 21, right? 20
that's
or
slightly complicated. complicated question.
Uh-oh.
So 2020 is what the data reflects, but we can get into why that's a little complicated.
So 2020, 572,000 acre feet of water was lost. And tell me, you had a great analogy in terms of the cities and how much water they use. And how much is 572,000 acre feet?
Yeah, it's a hard number to picture. But one way that was helpful for us to understand it was just to compare it to how much water certain cities in Texas demand on an annual basis. So looking at 2020 annual demand, the amount of water being lost in Texas is equal to the amount of water demanded in Austin, Fort Worth, El Paso, Laredo, Lubbock. I think I got all the cities. All those cities combined.
That's a lot.
So it's a ton of water.
A lot.
Yeah.
I mean, Austin is one of the largest cities.
Yeah.
Fort Worth pretty much there as well.
El Paso's growing.
Yep. And so, just thinking about, how much money might be saved in terms of our investment in, future water supplies in terms of, new supplies and maybe avoiding some of those projects that have got significant environmental impact.
Yep.
That seems to me like that's low hanging fruit, and people would see this, and the cities would like, okay, we'll do this first because it's cheap and easy to do, and we don't get sued by anybody because they think we're taking their water.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate you bringing up the the environmental impact part. We can't afford to just keep creating more and more water supplies in the state. There's even if we're just meeting the needs of people in agriculture and power generation, we're not going to be able to keep doing that. But we also want to make sure that our rivers and streams are healthy fish and wildlife habitat, that we have water flowing out of our rivers into our basin estuaries, so we can still support ecotourism industry, support our commercial fisheries. All these things require water.
Right.
So when we think about water loss, this is water we already have. Not only that, we're treating it.
Pipes.
Yeah, it's in our pipes. We're treating this water. We are spending money to make it into clean, potable drinking water, and then we're losing it as it's being transported. It's not disappearing off the face of the earth. It may be, going into a storm sewer or recharging an aquifer or something, but it's water that we have spent money on chemicals, manpower, electricity to treat and move to our household. So we need to make sure that as much as possible reaches its intended destination. And, no system is going to be 100% tight, and things happen. We have droughts, the ground moves, pipes crack, we have snowstorms, all kinds of things happen.
Yeah.
But we really can efficiently and affordably do a lot to reduce that water loss.
Even if you set aside the environmental concerns, just on a practical level, the new state water plan calls for 23 new major reservoirs. And if you look at the track record of getting major new reservoirs built, that's
right.
It's a headache for everyone involved,
Right.
And seems like a much more practical, like as you said, low-hanging fruit, a good place for us to start and for the state to start.
So, just looking at that, thinking about that figure, 572,000 acre feet, what's a figure that if it was reduced down to so many thousands of acre feet that you'd say, hey, you're doing pretty good. If it was instead of 572,000, it was X.
Well, that's a big part of our methodology of our analysis, was trying to find numbers that were realistically achievable and in a cost-effective manner. And roughly, if we can get utilities performing to roughly a 75th percentile compared to their peers, we can save about half that water. So 249 1,000 acre feet, which is a tremendous amount of water. And that's with very realistic, cost-effective approaches. And if we push a little bit harder and get to a 90th percentile of performance, that's 359,000. So that's almost 3/4 of the water being lost.
Wow.
And this is based on there's some technical appendices in this report for people that really want to go in deep on this. But we came to these numbers by doing an analysis called the frontier analysis. We had a water loss expert, Alan Wyatt, work on this with us. He's done this type of analysis in other countries and other states. It's never been done with the Texas data. But what it really does is it groups utilities into cohorts that are similar, like age and pipe material, and a whole host of different things. And you look at we use water loss audit data submitted by utilities in Texas. We take out kind of the outliers and the folks that have data that's that we determined to be pretty noisy. Yes, noisy is a good word for it. Water loss audit reporting is very complicated, and any city that does it will know that. It's a very, very long Excel sheet with a lot of numbers in it and a lot of data. But what we did is we looked at what the high performers are. So that's like the frontier, and then you plot the other cities along that. And so if you're performing at the average performance level, the 50th percentile, that means that your water loss is better than 50% of the utilities in Texas, and 50% of them are doing better than you, right there in the middle. And so we're really looking at good performance, which we call it average good and very good performance, and that equates to 50th, 75th, and 90th percentile.
Who are your stars? So tell me.
We're really not trying to pull out specific cities here. We're literally looking at telling the story. The cities, the new cities with new infrastructure are doing better than the bigger old cities with old infrastructure.
Suburbs, new suburbs of major cities. Yeah, you can guess maybe in Austin.
Yeah,
up north.
I was just thinking. Yeah,
they are doing better than some of the old cities that are struggling with older infrastructure. That's much harder to fix.
No round drinks, but put something in. All right.
I'm doing okay on my drink, but y'all want to? Yeah, no, you're doing fine.
Would you like to say anything for the microphone?
Hey.
Hence the reason I've been kind of
right.
inside of it.
So we're talking about water.
Oh,
yeah.
Interesting. Which war, if you don't mind me asking?
No, water. Oh, sorry. I have an accent. Sorry about that. And after I've had half of one of these cocktails, I had more of an accent.
Things just start slurring.
Yeah, sorry about that.
My apologies.
No worries. So, we're talking about the wet stuff.
Interesting. Well, I leave you guys to it then. I don't want to interrupt it.
Thanks.
So, this report actually looked at some other cities and some other states, right? Yeah. So, what's do you have a sense as to how Texas might be doing compared to other states in general, or is that not really part of this analysis?
So the data that we looked at or compared to other states was mainly the costing data, getting a sense of the cost ranges for specific strategies. This kind of frontier analysis approach has actually not been applied, as far as we know, to specific other states in the U.S. So this is kind of a first.
Oh, really? Okay.
It's been applied internationally, but the contexts are very different.
Okay.
But this is kind of a newish approach for other states as well. So the impression we're getting based on feedback from other people is that other states are interested now in adopting a similar analysis.
Gotcha. Well, so if there's not another state to compare it to, there are a couple of cities in other states that are compared in here. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
And the other cities analysis too was really, as Johnathan said, to help understand the costing and just the approach and kind of the different things that they did, showing that it really is kind of like a systems approach. and that it requires consistent investment. Water loss is not something, from our conversations with these cities, water loss is not something that you fix it and forget it.
Right.
You have to continue to maintain the system. The cities that we talked to also tended to use revenue, like their kind of general funds, if you will. They didn't take out loans. They just dedicated some of their money every year to keep working on these systems. And they employed a variety of tactics. And depending on what you're doing, there's a lot of different things that you can do. And it depends on kind of what you're trying to, what problem you're trying to fix. So it requires consistent attention and consistent investment. And, at the beginning, on the onset, to really try to solve big, gnarly problems, it could be a big program. And you could really kind of, maybe address some situations. But I think, the thing that we really learned from them is, they have had a big focus in investment, but they keep investing.
I think one of the consistent themes that came through from other cities elsewhere is really at least one area of success was focusing on data first, refining, making sure you're getting accurate data is kind of the basis of any kind of successful water loss program. And the cities like Nashville, Tennessee, and a few others.
I mean, really kind of similar to Austin.
Yeah,
I always
exactly.
think.
Yeah. But they've experienced success by starting with focusing first on cleaning up your data, making sure you have an accurate picture of what you're dealing with before coming up with any kind of, shovel plans.
So I have now more a philosophical question, because I'm getting to the bottom of my martini glass. And you kind of hit on this a little bit earlier, Jennifer. I think you said, well, we just can't keep developing new water projects. So, it's something I'm very interested in. We don't really spend a whole lot of time thinking about how can we change human behavior around water, at least not in the state water planning process, seems like. And I've been thinking about that a lot, kind of for the same reason. There's so many reservoir sites available, and it's very hard to even build a reservoir. We're working on our second one really since the late 80s right now. And desal, seawater desal is, I guess, a possibility. Corpus is trying to do that, but it's very expensive and, big environmental impacts if you discharge the brine into the bay, potentially. Yeah. There are other projects, types of projects available, but, over time, there's fewer options in some regards, and they're definitely more expensive. Do you think we should maybe be spending more time kind of looking at how we're using our water and trying to incorporate that more into the water planning process, as opposed to just okay, here's how much we need, and these are the options for getting this amount of water. One of the reasons why I say that is, some of the plans you go back and look at, I recently was looking at, I think it's the 84 plan. May have got that year wrong, but I think it's 84. And I was looking at how many projects were in that plan and how many have actually been built, because that plan kind of anticipated being built out by 2020, 2030. And I think there are 44 projects in it, and I counted 7 or 9.
Sounds about right.
So,
well,
and that's the old planning process, right? That's the top down, and now we have a bottom up. But I'm still curious what you think about, our focus on water planning. Maybe it should also include more of thinking about changing behavior, or maybe finding new ways to use the infrastructure we have now.
Yeah. So a couple of thoughts with that. I mean, I think that's a great question. As I look at the water planning process and the process that SB1 set up and this every 5-year regional water planning process, Conservation and, making more efficient use of the water we already have has become a bigger and bigger part of that. And I'm really glad to see that, especially as a regional water planning group member for Region K. Reuse has become a bigger part. And my understanding is, it's one of our recommendations, and I think the board is going to run with it, is that water loss will become a standalone water management strategy, so we can have some more refinement around these strategies to kind of take the water that we already have and use it more efficiently. So I'm really heartened by that. I do think that a lot of communities are moving towards alternative water supply strategies, not so alternative anymore, but like reuse, on-site reuse, AC and rainwater capture, AC condensate and rainwater capture, and all these things. And I don't think that there's necessarily an easy, clean way to reflect that in the regional water planning process. In fact, rainwater harvesting is zero. It's not a strategy that has any amount attached to it, because it's the regional water planning process is drought time, and we assume we're not going to have rain.
Right.
So I think that the behavioral type things fall typically under water conservation, and water conservation is included in a lot of plans. And I know in my region, Region K, our region, because we're all in Austin here in Central Texas, we strongly include water conservation, but we can't make any community do water conservation. But we actively include it as a part of the regional water planning process. And I think we need to really think about, is there a way that we can compel or incentivize communities to get on the water conservation train? I mean, I think, we have come so far from when I first started doing this work and saying, would you please consider conserving some water? So I think that's all really important. I think the other thing with the regional water planning process is, we're not really affirmatively planning to meet environmental needs. And so, that's a problem. I don't think any of us really wants to dewater our rivers or have unhealthy bays or anything like that. And I think, that it's just been kind of this thing that's like, oh, it's cool, it's going to be taken care of. We've got this other SB3 process, but that hasn't really been operationalized in the way that we really want it to be. So I think that,
that's a whole other podcast.
The regional water planning the regional water planning process gets better and better every time, but we still have some big holes.
I can give a very much more vague and abstract addition to
we're into that here.
I think you put your finger on that part of the problem, really. Like in the water world, we talk a lot about the Valley of Water. I mean, the U.S. Water Alliance has a whole campaign centered on it. But that's largely because, for the most part, we don't value water at all.
Right.
We don't really have a clear understanding of the Valley of Water. I think a lot of my research, looking at other contexts elsewhere in the world, more arid contexts, water is basically worshipped,
Yeah.
It's the highest cultural value. Obviously, we don't need to switch to some sort of water religion, but shifting culture towards towards some kind of much more centering of the
I did get baptized, so that's kind of
it's true.
We can use some water reverence. Sure. That would lead into the behavior change that Todd was talking about.
Yeah.
I think it tracks.
I mean, it's a big question. How do you get people to change their behavior?
Right.
I would also like to propose a podcast about Johnathan's thesis.
Yeah.
Because we all need to learn more about it.
I'm serious. I do want to look at it. Kind of on the same line here, I remember when I started out and in the late 80s, and the thought that cities could get down to like 130 or 120 gallons per capita per day their water use. I mean, it was like no thought of that. When I heard people say, oh, maybe we might eventually be able to get down to like 200 or 180 or something like that. And, that floor, is gone. And we're now in the 120, 130 range. And, people are still putting a lot of water on lawns and stuff. And so it's like a lot more to go. I mean,
that reminds me of a point I wanted to make that I immediately forgot, but is that when we talk about the regional water planning process, I do think it's good that we update it every 5 years, because I don't think it's really easy for us to predict how and how much water we're going to be using. A really stark example that comes to mind is the city of Austin in 1999 negotiated a water deal with LCRA. And I think it was really panned at the time. It was $100 million Austin paid for water. And there was this trigger in it. And once we reached this trigger of 201,000 acre feet of water use per year for 2 years in a row, then it also would start paying for water, like on a per acre foot basis, which is the unit of measure that we use for water and payment. And so, when that contract was signed, the prediction was that Austin would meet that level of water use in 2015. And, we're still not anywhere close to that. And it doesn't mean that Austin hasn't grown and the people aren't here. Because the people are certainly here, but now we're predicted to meet that trigger, this payment trigger, in 2035. And that's huge. Like we have changed our water use so dramatically that we have put off this trigger that we thought where we would need more water, or that we would need to start paying for this trigger, and granted it's a big incentive because it's going to cost a lot of money once we start paying for it. And we're all going to pay for it, and then maybe we'll be a little more in touch with the value of water in our community. But to put that trigger off for 20 years through conservation, efficiency, really good water management, behavior change in our city, when everyone gets their meters and gets to log on and can see how much water they use, hopefully that'll help too. But that is like a real testament to how, in 1999, we thought water use would go this way, and now we're sitting here in 2022, and we think that we're going to not hit that trigger until 20 years later than we thought. And who knows, maybe, at 2030, we'll be like, we're not hitting that trigger to 2050. So it's very, we don't know how we're going to be using water. But I do know that we're going to be using it more efficiently.
So, two things. One is I was living here then, and, if you had told the people who negotiated that deal, oh, by the way, Austin's going to grow even faster and there'll be even more people than you think right now, you're projecting. And by the way, we aren't going to use this much water. And it's going to be put off another 20 years, like you said. I don't think no one would have believed you, right? So
it's just like one very good example in a sea of examples around our state. And the thing is we're a state that is experiencing climate change, and we're experiencing it through water. We have deep droughts, we have flash droughts, we have triple-digit days, unending triple-digit days.
These are all reasons why I like to be in Montana.
We are really, it's coming at us.
Do you have a sense of what was the major driver for the decline in consumption? I mean, you listed a bunch of things, but
so Austin really started embarking on a water conservation program, and it really became an ethic for this community. Austin's a special place, and everyone that's not in Austin is gonna roll their eyes right now on the webinar, but and we really doubled down on that, and I think we still have a long ways to go. San Antonio is the same way, but I think that a city also, they have drivers, they have levers, San Antonio had the limit on the Edwards Aquifer. If you have an unlimited water supply for days and it's cheap and plentiful, are you really digging in on this? Maybe not. Eventually we're all going to have to, come to terms with that. So, the bringing it back to the water loss report, this is a huge amount of water that we're losing every year. And we're not trying to say, hey guys, you're all doing it wrong or anything like that. We're saying that here's a big opportunity. And we have a really robust planning process in this state. And we have identified, where our gaps are in supply. And we're proposing, hey, why don't we look at filling this gap through repairing our leaky infrastructure? Because this is water we already have. It's a sound investment. Maybe we'll still need to drill some, groundwater wells. Maybe we'll still need to have an interbasin transfer from somewhere, but maybe we won't.
Yeah.
And maybe we can rely on our locally available water supplies and keep, rely on the water that we already have in our communities, because that would really be the best scenario. So that's really the point that we're trying to drive home, and that it can be done economically. And by goodness, we had no idea that the IIJA was even going to be a thing.
Right.
We had no idea when we started this, and we certainly didn't time this
and
for
the drought.
when it came out.
And the drought.
But so we have no excuses if this isn't just like the wave of the future. But we hope that this provokes a real conversation about how we should be planning for future water supplies.
And guess what? We're almost exactly at 1 hour with that. That's perfect timing. You did it better than you did in rehearsal, by the way.
The margarita helps.
Margaritas help everything. So we're going to wrap up here. Why don't you tell us how we can find out, how we can find this report, and also how we can find out more about the National Wildlife Federation in Texas and the Texas Living Water Project.
So the place to go is our website, texaslivingwaters.org. That's the center hub for all the work we do in Texas as part of the National Wildlife Federation. The Texas Living Waters Project is a collaboration with other organizations as well, the Nature Conservancy, Sierra Club, Hill Country Alliance, Galveston Bay Foundation. They all have collaborated on this. And you can, if you visit our website, you can subscribe to our newsletter, follow us on Twitter. We like to tweet every once in a while. We have a hankering for live tweeting, hearings at the Capitol, if you're into that sort of thing. But yeah, that's the best way to track us.
We have the coveted TX Water Twitter handle.
Yeah,
that's us.
Nice.
So come find us.
It's an easy one to remember. And so we've been talking with Jennifer and Johnathan about the Hidden Reservoirs report addressing water loss in Texas. Jennifer, Johnathan, thank you for joining us today on Texas+Water.
Thank you so much.
Did I mess that up? You know what? If you're listening to this podcast, you know what I'm
talking about. If they made it this far, they know.
Right.
You know the name.
So this has been Texas+Water. My guests, plural, today were Jennifer Walker and Johnathan Seefeldt. We both work for the National Wildlife Federation's Texas Coast and Water Program. So if you like the presentation today, give it a like. No one ever gives it likes. I don't know why. They never do.
We'll put it on our Twitter.
That'd be good. They're listening to them, but I don't listen to these podcasts, but they don't like it. Or they don't give it likes. Anyway, I try not to take it too personal. My name's Todd Votteler. Let's talk water again soon.